I am unashamed. What about you?
Welcome back to Unashamed. Still down here at the Southern Lair. Zach's still coming in from North Carolina. Jase is all alone in the Unashamed studio. Jase, I noticed, so the last time we did podcast, which for us is a couple of days, the audience, they kind of keep rolling out. But so you were making one of your salient points. You had done a deep dive on something, and I was tracking with you, interested in everything you were saying. And you and I both noticed, we look in our little boxes because we're all little squares, looking at the monitor. And Zach is in the middle of like a big yawn, like whatever you're saying, it was sleepy time.
I actually was saying the aspect of time in the Bible in the New Testament uses two different words. And one of them is, what is the significance of the time? And I was literally making the point, this should be thrilling, that we're not just letting time pass us by, or all the idioms that, I'm wasting time or doing time. I mean, all these little slogans that we have. And I'm like, for us in Jesus, the time we spent has significant value, not only to the planet, but for all of eternity. And it wasn't that I noticed it, Al. I heard it. And look, it's hard to make me angry. I was hot. I looked at Maddie. So we finished that podcast.
I said, that's a young man's game. I got a 4-year-old at the house that's keeping me up at night. I've got all my kids in from college. It's just, I'm not sleeping well, but hey, and this is not a promotional for any particular thing, but I do have this on set today.
And now he's got the monster drink, Jase. That's why I noticed this, because that was one of the last conversations we had off camera, and I noticed he had the giant energy drink. So
when I was in West Monroe, we were, I think we've told y'all we're doing, we have a fifth episode coming out on August 29th. We're going to start adding a fifth episode with Hillsdale College. We're actually taking a course on Genesis, and so we have Christian, Sadie's husband, and then John Luke are doing it with us, and so they come in Duck Commander, and I've been so tired lately because I've been just running like crazy. I had a Monster energy drink, and I walked by, and Christian, who is a health nut, he looks at me and goes, "Monster energy drink." I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Huh," and just
interesting.
Interesting. So I know some of y'all probably are judging me right now, thinking, especially those are horrible for you, and I know they are. But Jase, I want to please you, so I will not be yawning today because I have this.
Since you brought it up, when does that Hillsdale? Does that August 29th is the first episode?
Yeah, you can go to if you want to. So if you want to sign up, because you can take the courses for free. I mean, they're really good. We just started doing it. Genesis. We're going to do Genesis. I think 6 lectures on the book of Genesis. But you can go to unashamedforhillsdale.com and you can sign up and take what I hope you'll do is like take the course with us.
Yeah.
And that way each episode on Friday, Hillsdale Friday, will be us discussing the content, which was really good.
It was really the professor that does it is fantastic. And what's interesting, Zach, I kept thinking about my mentor especially, Bill Smith, who always used to tell me, don't stop studying. And, I've taught Genesis several times. I'm very intimate with the book in terms of knowing the themes of it. But, anytime you listen to someone else teach, you learn something you didn't know.
That's true.
Dr. Jackson is the guy's name, but it's well worth taking. It's free, which is fantastic. So I definitely encourage you to follow us along. I think you're gonna love it.
But Jase, I won't be yawning today. Okay,
that's okay. I
apologize.
My therapy the last 2 days since I've seen y'all is because your name comes up because you're in our family, and so people's names come up. So I referred to you the last 2 days to my lovely wife as the yawner.
The yawner.
And so then I got to tell her the story. Of course, it's so funny.
There was the eye roll. I guarantee you Missy had an eye roll.
I'll tell you about my wife. She's always going to take my side, so which is, that's good. We're married. We're one. And I think her line was, "That's ridiculous. How embarrassing for him." I said, "Well,
nobody saw it."
I said, "Nobody saw it," because his whole point was, well, when the camera shot is on you, they're not looking at me. But I was
true.
like, the morale factor at that moment, which made me think we need a yawning button. I wonder, because we get these little appliances from our local Dollar Generals from people who listen, and that would be, I don't know if they have a yawning button or not.
All right, Unashamed Nation, you've been given a
Yawn
challenge.
button.
Find us a yawning sound.
Yeah.
Because I would use it when people start arguing about things that are not related to the Bible being about a person or Jesus specifically, where they get all worked up, and it has nothing to do with anything significant. Speaking of that time aspect, and so it would be fine to press the yawning button, but that was my point. That was like the exact wrong time to be.
But you can't choose when you yawn, though. That's the thing, and it has less to do with the moment you're in, and more to do with the moment you came out of. And so the moments that I came out of were moments where I have not been sleeping. It's just chaos. I guess with everybody's
It's
home,
like
you're
me. The night before I'm going to do podcasts, I don't schedule anything. Therefore, I can have
Well.
a good night's sleep, so I'm not yawning.
You don't. When you got a 4-year-old, you don't schedule when they're going to be up.
Well, I have 4 of them under 4 at various times, so I get it. I understand that. But
I feel like I should get out my little mini violin and start playing it, lady.
well, I'm kind of on a. It made me change my pattern. Usually I study the night before. I didn't last night because I was involved in so many other Bible studies.
Yeah.
And they just kept it through text. And one of them's a new Christian. I think I told his story. He's 18. But the other guy who was on our podcast maybe 7, 8 podcasts ago, Blake.
Oh, Blake?
Yeah.
Blake Cook,
yeah.
yeah.
Because I was so impressed with him. But he's basically a new Christian. He's only been in a couple of years. And I when we finished, he's like, "Man, I learned more in that little session just from going through a few Bible verses." And I was like, you need that Bible as a foundation.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. It's about Jesus, and you're all in on Jesus. So we started a Bible study, and so I was like, read the book of John, which we're doing that in the podcast, but we have a propensity to get deep in the weeds, but we're doing that because the first time we studied John, how would you describe it, Al? The difference in then and now.
Well, I think just probably the depth of us doing all the other Gospels and the Old Testament. What happens is when we come circle around 6 years later, I just think there's a deepening of we've dug a lot deeper into the entire Bible itself and this theme of Jesus. So, I mean, it's definitely richer and better from my perspective, both on the teaching side and the learning side. So it's
we're also connecting
Yeah.
Jewish history, the Old Testament fulfillment,
Yeah.
which even like where we're at right now, John 13, it says, you know, he specifically starts that off by saying it was the time of the Passover. And, well, he's doing that on purpose. Well, if you don't know what the Passover was about,
Yeah.
and, you know, you go to, I think it's Exodus, probably chapters 11 through 13 there,
Yeah.
where it discusses that, then you're gonna be limited in understanding how powerful what Jesus did. I just think when you look at the details, because it was basically Israel's liberation, and think about the liberation that Jesus is offering now from sin itself and death, not just because some nation has control over you. I mean, that would be horrible. You'd be oppressed, and you'd be very thankful if you were liberated from that. But we're talking about sin and death itself and the evil powers that are against us.
Yeah, and you know, Jase, I was thinking about when we did Your Lovely Wife, and I think it was Lindy and maybe some other people collaborated maybe 10 or 12 years ago. They wrote a sort of drama / musical project called the Crimson Gospel, and I helped a little bit on the project, and because I was kind of tying in some of those pieces, but the idea that there's a picture, and it really starts back in the garden, but then it goes through the Passover, through Rahab with the scarlet cord, and all throughout Jewish history, you just see these little glimpses of this. And the idea was this color red, which ultimately would describe the blood of Jesus, which really saves the entire planet. But the pictures of it are all throughout. And so that whole musical, which we all went down to Orlando, and some very famous, really good Christian artists performed that thing. You remember that, Jase? And it was super powerful. But I just love the idea. There's so many different ways to tell this story and these stories. Yeah, that they're just rich. Every time you get into it, it's rich, because it brings, to your point, it brings Jesus out every time. I've been on this weight loss journey. You've been kind of doing it with me out here in Unashamed Nation. I appreciate all the kind comments that you guys give me. When I turned 60, my goal was to lose 60 by 60, and I passed that goal, which is a blessing. And it's all because of PhD Weight Loss and the job that they've done. Dr. Ashley Lucas is the founder. The program teaches you what to eat, when to eat. It works on your relationship with food, and it shows you how to lose weight for life. And one of the things I love about these guys is they put you in contact. I talk to a person every week that gives me a little bit of counsel, a little bit of encouragement, answers whatever questions I have. So they're not just leaving you twisting in the wind. They're going to be right there with you every step of the way. Here's a picture of me on YouTube at the beginning. Here I am some 30 weeks and 65 pounds later, looking good, feeling a lot better. I didn't really plan on my meds being cut in half, but that's what's happened. Hopefully the next time I do a checkup, I'll be off those meds altogether. No gimmicks, no injections, no side effects. You're not eating rabbit food. You're staying full because of the high protein content, which is really great. And PhD Weight Loss provides about 80% of your food every week. So it's going to help you on that side as well. So I want you to check these guys out. Join me on my weight loss journey. Schedule your one-on-one consultation today by calling 864-644-1900, or you can visit myphdweightloss.com. That's 864-644-1900. Tell them Al Robertson sent you.
Well, I agree. And in view of Zach's yawning and these two questions, the first two questions, so that's what I did with one of these brothers here. I was like, read the book of John. I mean, they're both doing this at the same time, but one of them's ahead of the other. It's like, read the book of John and just ask yourself a question. Who is Jesus? Who is this Jesus? Have that vein. Of course, what happened was, in both cases, well, they start reading it, and since they don't know the history or the big picture is what I'd like to call it,
yeah,
they get distracted by the small things that they don't understand. And so here was his questions. He was like, I'm 6 chapters deep in the book of John. I have 2 questions. What does it mean that Jesus is the Word? And that he was with God and was God. Is Jesus God? Well, when I read that, no, that's the first question asked 3 different ways, but I thought, well, I figured you would have got that. You know, I mean, we did a podcast, because he's listening to the podcast too, and I think there's a danger when you get kind of so deep into things, you just kind of miss
some of the simpler.
What was that? What does that mean? And so the second question, you'll get a kick out of this. That's what I thought you'd get a kick out of this, which I love that first question.
That's a great question.
But now, just think about it. How do you respond to that in a text?
I was about to say, this sounds like a conversation.
Well, I'll tell you, after I sent my text in response, I said, I'm normally not this long-winded, which may or may not be true. I said, but that was a hard thing to explain. The second question, because he got this from John too, if alcohol is bad and drunkenness is a sin, why did Jesus turn water into wine so others could continue to party and get drunk?
That's a good question.
That's a good question.
Yeah, so those were the two questions. So I thought I would get your opinion in how to answer that in the spirit of not being yawners or to grasp the big picture. So what say you? And I'll give you my response.
On the alcohol question first?
Well, either one. I think they're good questions.
Well, the alcohol question, alcohol is not bad. Clearly, because Christ did. I mean, I think that's a good
So
text.
pause there, because when I got to the second question, I said, here's the short answer. Alcohol is never said to be bad in the Bible. All right, so continue. We have that exactly. I said the same thing. All right, go ahead.
Drunkenness is considered a sin.
All right. Well, my second sentence was getting drunk is always bad, but there are many substances that you can get drunk on. Yeah. Because I was giving him a subliminal message. It's not just alcohol. Yeah. I mean, you can get the right kind of mushrooms.
Marijuana, mushrooms.
I mean, there's all kind of ways.
Frog poison.
Prescription drugs are as big a problem as anything.
Let me tell you, from what I've heard, you can drink enough NyQuil, which I guess that is alcohol, but, cough medicine, whatever, vanilla.
But be careful of that, because that'll ruin your liver, because it's got acetaminophen in it. NyQuil does. Be careful. You get Tylenol overdose.
Okay, Dr. Health.
Yeah. Well,
See, that would have been a perfect place for a yawn.
Yeah.
Acetaminophen.
Well, and
as he sips on this giant Monster energy drink.
It's because I've been shamed. I've been shamed by Jase. But the same guy that half the time I'm talking, he's looking at his phone. He says he's looking up a scripture. I don't know if I believe that, but
I think he's got ongoing Bible studies now with all these.
He might though. Yeah. I don't know what he's doing.
So I then put on the alcohol question, I think Ephesians 5:18 and 19 is a pretty good picture of the question you're asking, which is don't get drunk on wine, which leads to debauchery.
Yeah,
that's a good verse.
But instead be filled with the Spirit, sing, make music in your heart, So, and then I put Galatians 5:22. I put not getting drunk as a fruit of the Spirit. Galatians 5:22 has self-control as a fruit of the Spirit. So basically, you see what I was saying, which I think is an interesting word. You have the Spirit, but one of the fruits of the Spirit is self-control, because everybody's like, well, there's nothing you can do. There's not. Self-control is a fruit of the Spirit. Yeah. You have an opportunity not to get drunk, to exercise self-control because of the Spirit of Christ that's in you. Now, here, I think this is the funny part of what I said. However, after all of that, what me and Zach just basically said, this has nothing to do with John 2, nor is it the point.
No, that's
correct.
Whatsoever. Jesus is revealing a picture of who he is and what he's going to do.
Right.
Which was my original question in why you should read John.
Yeah.
And so, but I get it. I asked the same question when I was 2 years in the faith, because I'm like, what's this changing the water to wine? We as I think, especially in America, tried to make everything apply to us. And we kind of look at the Bible, which I went on to say this in my text, as a rule book. Just like we're taking a college exam, read the book of John and ask me any questions. He's like, well, here, since I've had a problem with alcohol in the past, this just seems like something that's not good. So why is that in there?
I would advise Blake or anybody, because Blake, I mean, he shared his testimony pretty openly.
Oh, yeah, I don't think
he shouldn't touch it at all. I mean, so there's people that I would say, hey, you probably shouldn't touch that stuff because you got a history with it. And you didn't really learn how, you maybe stay away from that for a while.
I agree with that assessment.
And also, I wouldn't have a drink around somebody that I knew had an issue with it.
Yeah.
Or had an issue.
I've said before many times. Yeah. I mean, I'm like the poster child for, controversy on that, because, I mean, I don't think drinking's wrong, and I've never been drunk. I mean, I would be one who could make a case, hey, you should never do that, because I've never had a problem with that, but I don't, because the Bible says the exact opposite. I mean, you remember the passage in Timothy where he's like, I hear you're having stomach problems. Drink a little wine and that'll help you out. Or it's somewhere in Timothy. But
Yeah.
but that's
Jase-
not the point. My what I want to. I think this is an interesting conversation. That's not what that's about
Yeah.
whatsoever.
Which I think that's such a smart point, because you properly showed that when any of us, especially come out of the worldly situation, in other words, we didn't just kind of come to faith through our youth, but lived a time among the world and, had some of these same things that you read about, some of the New Testament conversions. And obviously you're looking at everything through that lens. I'm trying to stop doing one thing to start doing something different. But the more you get to know this Jesus and what he is really not only offering you, but what he's given you that you just hadn't realized the gifts yet, the more that becomes part of your walk and your existence and your day to day, it becomes not the do and don't do, but this is who I live for. So I think you're properly showing the process that happens. And that's this idea of discipleship.
And you also have you get these Old Testament passages about, like in Psalms, that wine makes the heart merry. The context of the ceremony that they're in is a wedding, right? So there's the celebration aspect of it. There's joy. This isn't like a bender fraternity party where everybody's just funneling beers till they're just completely blitzed. That's not the scene.
Yeah.
This is a celebration of a union, and so I think that the story too of Jesus turning water into wine is directly connected to the new wine that Jesus says he's bringing.
Yeah.
He's bringing the kingdom is breaking in. So it's no accident that he's doing this miracle, making new wine at a wedding ceremony. Right, because we're the bride of Christ. There's all kind of imagery here that's being played out, and so I think this is not a text. Good point, Jase. It's not a text on a for or against alcohol consumption. It's bigger. So here's the deal about rates, mortgage rates. They're still high. We all know this, and that can make a huge difference if you're purchasing or refinancing a home. It can make it feel out of reach. But markets can shift very quickly, and when they do, I want you to be in the strike zone. In fact, I think the Feds right now are talking about dropping interest rates. What is the strike zone? Well, it's the sweet spot when rates dip just enough for you to be able to meet your target goals, but a lot of times it doesn't last very long, so you got to be ready to strike and save big, and that's where our friends at Sierra Pacific Mortgage come in. Andrew and Todd and their team, they will get you set up, and they will keep you informed in real time so that you can strike when the time is right. But you got to get ahead of the curve, right? So go ahead now, get all the pre-qualifying out of the way, be ready to move when the markets drop. With 40 years of experience, these guys really are the experts. I love both of these guys. They're amazing people. They make it easy because they keep everything in-house. So get pre-qualified today with andrewandtodd.com. Do it now. Get yourself a priority spot in the front of the line before the rest of the herd jumps in. And when the market enters into the strike zone, you'll be ready to strike first and save big. Look, guys, it's super important that when you're making the biggest financial decisions of your life, you want to be doing that with someone that you can trust, someone that shares your same values. You can call Andrew Del Rey and Todd Avakian, the guys I trust, and they can help you too. Call 888-888-1172. That's 888-888-1172, or visit andrewandtodd.com. That's andrewandtodd.com.
So I mean, it just kind of was an awakening for me having these conversations, because I'm like, man, we're talking about all this stuff and it's not resonating. And just like what you just said, we're participating in the greatest party of all parties in Jesus. This is a way greater party and has nothing to do with being drunk. It's way better than that, which is what people, that's what they're drawn to. They're like, oh, we're just going to be free, party, get hammered, and do whatever our instincts tell us to do, and then wake up, recover a day or two, and then do it again, and call that living in life. And so I think within the grand scheme of God, the earth, the planet, human beings, eternity, I mean, here you have this story, and what should be being revealed to you when you hear the story of Jesus is, wow, I'm a part of this global purpose of God. And like there, I eventually am married to Jesus. And I got into the passages in Ephesians 5, where he's talking about husbands and wives, but he gets to the end, he's like, but I'm talking about you in Christ. You're married to Christ. I mean, which is what he's introducing here. You're part of the greatest party ever. And so, and the other point, if you want to get into it, but that's what I did, was give the overview of what he was pointing to. And I actually used our reference that we used last podcast about the time thing, because that's where he first said, my hour has not come. He said that to his mom at the beginning of the wedding venue. And so I explained that. I was like, Jesus is going to predict and always go back to that segment of him being born of a woman, being baptized, humbling himself, receiving the Spirit, and then doing all these great things to humanity, all these displays of God's character. I talked about the life, love, light, and just healing, showing compassion, forgiving sins. And then he's always pointing to his death, the defeat of his enemies, his resurrection, proof of the resurrection. Yeah. Then he poured out his Spirit. He went to the Father. Think about
that.
Yeah, being glorified.
He poured out his Spirit in Acts 2, when the Spirit of God came down in tongues of fire, and we've talked about this before, it's the rectifying of the Tower of Babel story, because people could hear each other talking in their own native tongues. But what did the people around them think they were? They thought they were drunk. And so you get this
that's
idea.
That's a good point.
So, wait, what are these guys up to? What kind of wine are they on? It's the new wine. And so you see in the story of Jesus turning the water into wine, it's the breaking in of a new reality into our space, right? A new reality's coming in. So one way you could look at it is the old law is the water, and then the kingdom of God is the new wine, which is breaking into our story now. And you really see it in Acts 2. I mean, that's like, because the Spirit's come then. Now, then it's like on. I mean, then it is on after that.
Well, and which to Jase's point, Ephesians 5, that's what Paul makes that distinction. He's like, look, you want to replace the spirits, whether they're evil spirits or the spirits, that you find in a bottle, replace it with the Holy Spirit, then you really got a jackpot party going on. This is true jackpot.
Exactly. And we're kind of burying the lead, which I put in my text response. I was like, I think you're taking too lightly that there was a human being on the planet claiming to be God that changed water to wine strictly because of a thought.
Yeah.
He willed it. He didn't come up with some concoction. He just did it. I was like, that kind of being that's a human who can make that kind of change with the physics involved, that's impossible, just to, not even have to blink. Well, he's giving you a picture. If you want to know how to change something, I'm your guy.
Yeah.
I mean, how many people in their life, all of them, at some point said, boy, I wish I could make this change or do something different. Or, well, I know a guy who's really good at changing stuff. And he literally can go outside the laws of nature themselves. And so I think that's what I'm trying to say is not, I'm using his vulnerability and being young in the faith, because I was exactly in the same point. I've had more arguments about John 2 on whether it was, some people say, well, I don't even think that was fermented wine. It's all these arguments come out. And I'm like, meanwhile, we've missed the exciting big picture of what's happening here and how you can be involved in the scheme of God's redemption.
But you get an agenda that you're trying to hold to, because you have a way you think the world should be, and then you start looking at the text, so you start having to read into that text, which to say that is, I think, to read into the text to say it wasn't fermented, and it misses the big point.
Well, think about
you
this.
start making stuff up.
Yeah.
Think about this. Think about
making it up.
the faith of his mother. How many times has your mom says, "Hey, you need to make some wine"? I mean, his mom believed in him enough. She said, "Do something about this wine situation."
Yeah.
I mean, that blows me away that she had enough faith in who he was in the moment to think he could do something, which he did.
Did. And so I realized I've hijacked the podcast, what we were going to do with these two questions. But I just think,
what was the first question?
It was about the word.
God?
And
Is he
look,
God?
I really struggled in how to make that short. But what I did was I did the same principle. I said, well, let's just think about the overall view. And I told him, I know y'all been studying Genesis in your other podcast. I said, go read the first 3 chapters of Genesis right now, because John 1 starts saying, in the beginning was the Word.
Yep.
And I said, find the Word in Genesis 1 through 3. Well, I realize that sounds easy if somebody has taught you, but, it was more difficult than I thought. Because I was thinking he would notice, like, as soon as it starts off, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and then it's like, and God said, let there be light. Well, when you say something, what do you use?
Words.
That's kind of where I was going, and I even mentioned, I gave a few hints. When you get, and he says it all over the place. He kept saying, and things kept happening. He'd say, things kept happening. Well, now we have 2 humans, and what did he do to them? He told them something. Well, what did he use? Words. He said, don't eat of that tree, eat of this tree. Well, then, don't you find it interesting? What was the first thing the evil one says?
Did God really say?
Did God really say?
Yeah.
So why is God using words? And who is that word, where that's coming from?
Yep.
Well, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. I just think that was the communication aspect of the Godhead, the Son. He just hadn't become flesh, and I had that down. Verse 14, now he became a human. And verse 17 says he explained God, because no one's ever seen God. Well, that's what words do. The Word became flesh to explain. So that's where I went. But when I got to the end, I thought those words that God spoke, which led to him choosing a nation, Israel, to be his representation to other nations. And God spoke words to him. He gave him a promise of blessing or a promise of curse. And what was the catalyst for that? The result of that? Either you trust what I say or you don't.
Yep.
And so then the Word becomes flesh. So not only did Jesus use words, he lived it out. He lived the words. So that explained God, which is how the Word become flesh. But it's still the same agenda. Are you going to trust Jesus, who is the Word of God? God saying, trust what I say. Because if you think about it, if I'll just make a blanket statement, if you would trust what God says, no matter whether he said it from the Father using the Son as the voice in the Old Testament, or whether he's saying it in Jesus as a human, nothing bad would ever happen to you. Nothing.
Yep.
If you just trusted him. Every time he said something, you're like, you know what? I'm going with it. Well, what bad could happen to you? Nothing. And you say, well, sure, there's going to be bad things that happen. Well, your sin's forgiven. You can't die. What other problem can we come up with? You're like, well, somebody else, died. Well, you're going to see them again, or evidently not know about it. So, that's the angle I went.
All right, Unashamed Nation, forget the white picket fence. For most Americans, the real American dream is this. It's getting out of debt. So if you're feeling pressured from rising prices, mounting credit card debt, or just trying to stay afloat, and I want you to know there is a way out. It's called Done with Debt. They have one goal, which is to break you free from debt permanently. They're not pushing bankruptcy. They're not pushing loans. Instead, they're tough negotiators, go straight to your creditors, slashing what you owe, wiping out interest, and eliminating penalties. They don't stop until your debt's gone. And the best part is this: most clients see more money in their pocket in the first month. You've worked too hard to let debt steal your future. With Done With Debt, your dream of being debt-free is actually possible. Al has struggled with debt issues in the past, so we actually know where you're coming from. Debt keeps you trapped. It really does, with high interest payments and penalties, but a service like this offers a light at the end of the tunnel. So here's what you need to do. Visit donewithdebt.com and talk to one of their experts. It's completely free. But some of their solutions are time sensitive, so you don't want to wait. Go to donewithdebt.com. That's donewithdebt.com.
But think about it, Jase. Even the written word, Peter makes the claim that the Holy Spirit was engaged and involved in that. Men spoke these prophecies as they were carried along by the Holy Spirit. So even that nature of the word, the written word, because we have the spoken word, the revelation, remember from Romans 1, and then we have the written word, which is thousands of years of history that syncs up the perfect story about the perfect man. And those men were carried along by the Holy Spirit, and women who share that story over time. So it keeps coming back. Remember in John, we read in the last podcast, John 15:3, I think it is, when Jesus told the disciples, he said, "You've been cleansed by the word I've spoken to you," which is in the context here of what he's talking about, this cleansing, because he's doing this washing of their feet. But the word has always been there. And it's so central to everything. From the
but what happens in John is that word becomes flesh, and I think what is interesting about those two questions is that they're deeply, deeply connected. Actually, understanding Jesus is the Word, and then this whole idea about why did He turn water into wine. If you think about, there's a documentary film that you should watch. I love it. I watched it probably 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, called "For the Life of the World." Letters to the Exiles. It's super. I mean, this thing is so well done. It's kind of like a weird artsy film, but it's written and based off of John 6 when Jesus says, "I give my flesh for the life of the world." It's what we talk about on this podcast all the time, that Christ didn't just save us from our sin. He also saved us to life. And so when you watch this documentary, it's like a story, and this guy's like going around, he's asking these questions about reality, about the purpose of life, and every expert that he asks a question to, they'll say, "Well, let's go down the hardware store with me. I got to get some stuff." And they're talking the whole time. You don't really understand what's going on until the very end. But they go buy a wheelbarrow, and they buy like a shovel and some rakes, and then they go to this like place that's like it's like thorns and thistles. It's just like a wild like garden, and they start to cultivate this thing. And so the whole process of the whole film is they're asking the question, what did Jesus die for? And then at the end of the film, they're answering the question as they're doing this work. Well, at the end of the film, what you realize is that, spoiler alert, that they're actually preparing for this incredible party. They're preparing for this feast. It almost looks like a wedding ceremony. And I think it's related here because that's what Jesus, when he said the Word became flesh, and then when you go to John 6, Jesus said, "I give my flesh for the life of the world." Well, that party that Jesus is at, that wedding ceremony, that's the picture of the kingdom breaking into our present reality, because what we're saved to is actually the party, the life in Christ, the celebration, the wedding ceremony. It's life and life abundantly, which is why when Jesus comes on the scene here, what you see in the new wine that he creates out of water is it's joy and abundance, And I think that that's a powerful connection.
So what I'd like to do is when you get to John 13, just to give you kind of an overall big picture, like we did with the Word, like we did with the changing the water to the wine. When you read these first 3 verses in John 13, it says, "It was just before the Passover." Jesus knew the time had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he now showed them the full extent or the end of his love, the uttermost of his love. The evening meal was being served, and the devil had already prompted Judas Iscariot, son of Simon, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things in his hands, and that he came from God. He had come from God, and he was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. What I was going to say is the big picture of the Passover, I went back and read Exodus 11 through 13. So, and you know what I found fascinating is, because you think about what was the Passover celebration that Israel, and by the way, they're still doing it today. This is still going on, this observance of what happened at the Passover.
And so the sad thing is, Jase, they missed it because we didn't need any more after this one right here we're reading about.
Yeah. So look, if you go back to Exodus, and y'all can fill in the blanks because I'm not going to read all 4 chapters, but just the heading in Exodus 11 is the plague of the firstborn. And you remember the story there, Al. I mean, do you want to share that? Exodus 12 is about the Passover. You have the plague of the firstborn. Well, that firstborn, does that not sound familiar?
Yeah.
Well, Jesus would become the firstborn of the dead. Yeah. And he was the firstborn of the creation. But go ahead, Al.
Yeah, it was the 10th plague, and it was the most costly of all, because every firstborn, both human and animal, in all of Egypt died in one night, except for Israel, who was covered by the firstborn, which is a really
exactly, because Israel sacrificed lambs and would put the blood on the doorpost. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
And this is how they were liberated. And look, the greatness about that story is it actually worked. They were liberated, but it only worked for a short time because death only got their attention.
Yeah.
But then they realized, and then they chased them, which eventually led to the parting of the Red Sea. But Jesus, him being the firstborn of the resurrection, that'll change you forever.
Yeah.
You know, and your participation in that. But here's what I wanted to read as far as big picture. Because when it says that God had placed all things in his hands, well, when you get to Exodus 13, I found this fascinating. And it's talking about the consecration of the firstborn and this observance. That he's like, you will observe this throughout history. This feast, this meal that Jesus chose to reveal the full extent of his love and the character of God. We're going back to Exodus 13, the ramifications of this liberation that would be celebrated. But I'm going to read 4 verses out of Exodus 13 because you're going back here, and you don't have to get the point. You can read all 4 chapters and see what Al just talked about. But in verse 3, it says, Moses said to the people, commemorate this day, the day you came out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. Now, here's the key point. Because the Lord brought you out of it with a mighty hand. Then he gets to verse 9. This observance will be for you like a sign on your hand and a reminder on your forehead that the law of the Lord is to be on your lips. There's the word. For the Lord brought you out of Egypt with his mighty hand. And you read verse 14 of Exodus 13. In days to come, when your son asks you, what does this mean? Say to him, with a mighty hand, the Lord brought us out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. Verse 16, and it will be like a sign on your hand and a symbol on your forehead that the Lord brought us out of Egypt with his mighty hand. I think you get the point.
So the first term life insurance policy that I actually got was my first year of marriage. I'm a big believer in term life insurance policy. You need to protect your family. There's just a lot of expenses that come up in life, and you don't know what's going to happen if something were to happen to you. And so I just always encourage people to be prepared for the unexpected, and term life insurance policy is one of the best ways that you can do that. So there's no better time for you to check out Fabric. Fabric by Gerber Life is a term life insurance policy that you can get done today. It's made for busy parents just like you, all online, all on your schedule, right from your couch, and you can be covered in under 10 minutes with no health exam required. If you've got kids like I do, and especially if you're young and you're healthy, the time to lock in those rates, it's right now. Fabric has policies that fit your family and your budget. For example, they have $1 million in coverage for less than $1 a day. And they're partner with Gerber Life, which I like because it's such a trusted brand. You know, I knew when I had my first child, I was like, hey, I need to get coverage and make sure these guys are taken care of if something happens to me. There's no risk. It's a 30-day money-back guarantee. You can cancel at any time. Plus, they have a rating of excellent on Trustpilot. So join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/unashamed. That's meetfabric.com/unashamed. MEET fabric.com/unashamed. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company. Not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions.
And so when you read John 13, and now fast forward however many hundreds of years, and you think about what happened back then, liberation for God's people. Now here is the Jew of all Jews, the perfect Israelite, coming to redeem not only them, but us and everyone. He says, when he made that statement, John, Jesus knew that the Father had put all things in his hands and that he had come from God and was returning to God. Well, why did he come? Why did he return? It's the establishment of a new creation, a new liberation, perfect freedom, not just from oppression, but from sin and death. And they're in his hands. Well, what did he eventually do with his hands? He had nails driven in them. He then made a point, and it's fascinating when you read all the verses. You know why after the resurrection, what did he continually do? He's like, look at my hands and my feet. So even the scars on his hands speaks liberation.
Yeah.
Because look, I was dead. They nailed nails in my hands. And when you think the whole Roman act of crucifixion, it was to show that you don't mess with us. You know, they put the crown of thorns, you know, and we talked about what thorns represent, you know. It's a power play. It's things that cause pain. It's a barrier that we're stronger than anybody, you know. So they put big thorns up around their fortresses, you know, like these big stakes with it's just a huge thorn. You say, why? Don't mess with us. We're the most powerful nation in the world. And they nail him up on a cross to publicly humiliate him. I mean, it wasn't just that they killed him. They were making a statement saying, this is what happens when you take us on. But him showing his hands that are now have been resurrected and glorified is showing you this is ultimate liberation. And, of course, then he puts his hands on them. You know, think about all those statements about that. And so that's why I think when you look at the big picture, it does have more meaning to us here today.
Did I tell you, Jase, that, you know, in the movie The Passion, which Mel Gibson directed, that when it came to the scene, if you watch when they stretch Jesus's hand, that you just see his hands and then there's a Roman, you know, hand that has the little, you know, cuff thing on the leather cuff, and it's hammering in that first nail. And someone said that I read somewhere that was actually Gibson wanted that to be his hand because we all had a hand in doing that. And I thought it was a powerful image once you kind of knew that behind the scenes, if that really happened, that we all had a hand in this idea. And I love the picture you're talking about, the mighty hand, in the same scene we're seeing here being washed, because you remember the final scene of the liberation, the escape, was when they went through the Red Sea, and then all of Egypt, who was chasing them, were drowned in the same water. And Paul said in 1 Corinthians 10, that was their cleansing, because there was a cloud above them, there was water on both sides. And in essence, that was the cleansing of coming out of Egypt, even though that same generation, the oldest generation, died in the desert on the other side of the water because they kept wanting to go back to Egypt. So to your point, you still have to embrace by faith what God is doing.
Well, you see here the cleansing ritual, right? Jesus is washing the feet,
Right.
and he says, if I don't wash your feet, then you have no share with me. And it's like that participatory phrase. Like you're participating in this with me, but it's also like a covenantal phrase as well, that God's making a covenant with these guys, and that is also connected to the Jesus turning water into wine at the wedding, because what ultimately is happening here is he's in the wedding feast, when he turns the water into wine, he's almost like announcing himself as the bridegroom. And then when you get here, he's talking to the bride, and he's telling the bride, I got to present you holy and blameless, right? And so if you don't let me wash you, then you can't actually be a participant in the covenant with me. So the washing then becomes the way in which that we enter into the covenant, which goes back to that Genesis 15 passage when God makes the covenant with Abram, and he basically moves alone through those dead animals to say, it's a one-way covenant, but we are invited in to participate. So God he actually accomplishes both sides of the covenant and then offers that to you, but you have to come in and be washed by the sacrifice of the covenant, which would become his own sacrifice, which that's the blood. Then it's new wine. What's the new wine? His blood is the wine. They're literally taking the Last Supper here. They're reenacting the Last Supper, which will become the Lord's Supper, which we take every Sunday at our church, and we drink what? Wine, or the fruit of the fruit of the vine. We're drinking the wine, which symbolizes his blood. So you can kind of see all of that running through the Gospel of John, but it is centered on a relationship that is built on a covenant. That's what Christ is doing. It's bridegroom and bride. And the bridegroom is actually accomplishing both sides of the covenant, both the demand for faithfulness, and he is faithful on his side, and the rectifying when that faithfulness is broken, when the adultery occurs. He makes both of them right. I mean, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah. And what did he wash their feet with? His hands.
Yeah.
So when he gets to verse 14 of John 13, and he says, now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I've done for you. That's why when people will say, which I agree with, but I think we take it too lightly, when we say, oh, we're the hands and feet of Jesus. Well, that is quite the standard.
Yeah.
Think of the scars, and because I had another Bible study this week, and they were talking about something came up, which they were, I thought, too depressed, to be a son of God, and I was like, look, scars matter. That means you're still here. You're back. You survived it. It's speaking resurrection. You came from the dead. You come through the pain, all these different things. And so when something brings that up, that reminds you, you can then take hope in what Jesus did to accomplish this. It's not saying this is a pain-free life, but it's speaking to the new creation and the new liberation that he was fixing to offer, but he set the stage right here in how we are to operate. And he gave you the catalyst that's why, elsewhere in this chapter, he's like, you don't understand this now, but you will. You'll get this, because I think he was having the cross in mind, that it was an act of love that was unconditional, which is really revealing the character of God himself. And that would pass on to us as being his representatives.
Well, and I love the idea, right, that then we carry that narrative. And you see that a lot of the New Testament epistles, the idea of what our hands do, but also our feet. I think about Romans 10, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. So
good point.
There's a lot of really rich symbolism in this, and we got a lot more to talk about, but we're out of time. Speaking of time, so we'll see you next time on Unashamed. Thanks for listening to the Unashamed podcast. Help us out by leaving a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. And don't miss an episode by subscribing on YouTube. And be sure to click the little bell and choose all notifications to watch every episode.